right, I am thrilled to be able to introduce all of you to someone who's become not only a mentor and a dear friend, but one of the unsung heroes of our business, one of the most accomplished professionals in the field of sound, and we'll talk about why that is so important for actors, especially those of you that are creating content and trying to make a living in this business, which is, I think, all of you. So we have with us this morning Emmy-winning Jack Levy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi.
You know, I'm much more used to being on the production side than the talent side, and the reason for that will be obvious very shortly.
And then our co-host this morning is Lara Gold. And so, Lara, why don't you quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm an actor, and I started young as a kid, and I studied a lot of theater. I studied Meisner in New York and moved to LA about a year and a half ago to start doing more TV and film. So I'm super excited to be here. And I listen to podcasts, and I just started getting into voiceover, so I'm really interested to hear what you have to
podcasts
say.
you listen to?
I listen to a lot of, I listen to Fresh Air. I listen to The Daily, Terry Gross. Yeah, mostly those. I listen to a lot of news, and then I like to listen to some story stuff.
Mm-hmm. And for those who haven't Googled you yet in the minute since I said your name, because you're driving or whatever, can you just share with people just a quick overview of your accomplishments? I mean, so...
I am a career audio professional. I started in record production, doing work for A&M, Capitol, Warner Brothers, RCA Records. I worked with everybody, Ray Charles and the Jacksons, and you know, all kinds, you know, George Clinton and Red Hot Chili Peppers. I did video game work. I did work for Electronic Arts. I did some of the music for a Mario Brothers game. I did work for Philips Interactive, Disney Interactive. But it's always been in audio production, and working in video games led me to sound design for feature film and television. Did Army of Darkness for Sam Raimi. I've done shows for scripted single camera 1 hour shows for Universal, for Warner Brothers, for ABC, NBC, CBS, HBO, USA, Turner, any of the usual suspects. And my job has traditionally been producing the audio portion of television. If that's the sound design for superheroes, that's what I do. If it's voiceover and actors, that's what I do. If it's balancing music and mixing it in surround, that's what I do. But a component of that job is finding and hiring voice talent to support that production. And that voice talent can be in there for a multitude of reasons.
Now, I didn't even know certain categories of work existed until I met you. And then not only did you blow my mind, but you actually created a workshop for a bunch of us to come in and learn from you about one thing in particular, which, let's just get it out there from the start, is loop groups, or what you call
Walla group.
Walla group. Can you just tell the listeners here what that is?
Sure. And I'll tell you what it is, and it's great for a SAG actor, you know, looking to supplement their income and expand their network. But here's what Walla is. You know, as working actors know, when you're on set shooting, if you're shooting a crime scene or a hospital scene, all the people in the background and all the humana is going on silent, because our goal is to get the best, cleanest recording of our primary actor's dialogue. If a cop is saying move back in the background, and on the stage I push the actor's line of dialogue, the cop saying move back gets louder too, which we don't want, so we want everything discreet. So on any show, typically a 1 hour scripted show, a group of 8 union actors come in. They get a day contract for that day. They get residuals just like they get on that day. If they were on ABC or HBO or USA, they get the same residual structure. But you're, you know, unlike if you're a guest star, if you're in the Walla group, you're very likely in every episode that season, or every episode all 6 seasons. So that gets to be really great experience for actors and really great mailbox money. But those actors have a very big job, which is in any single episode, you're not just the shopkeeper, you're the cab driver, you're the voice of the radio DJ, you're the priest in confessional, you're the prisoner in the next cell, you're the couple in the hotel room arguing. And you could find that you have to be those, you know, 7 or 8 discrete different things in any single episode. So a lot of those Walla group actors have a diverse skill set, foreign language, things like that.
Yeah, and you said it's a pretty small community that does this work.
It's, you know, listen, the acting community, the working acting community is small in and of itself. And then when you get into specialization, it's more. What really drives it being difficult for working actors to get into is there's a lot of reciprocity. Let's say I run a walla group, and I know you're super talented, you run one too. I say, listen, you call me in on CSI and I'll bring you in on Game of Thrones. And that's how it works. So there's a couple of key groups who work, but when those groups come in, you see all the same people in all those groups. 85% of the group is the same.
Yeah.
And
so for the listeners who are listening, when you're watching a scene and there's all this stuff that you hear that creates the environment and the world of the story, and as you're walking past the waiter, or as the camera's going past a waiter or a couple at a table, if you can barely pick up on like what they're saying and all that, that was actually recorded in a studio as part of a loop group.
But there's oftentimes that you're featured as well. On Battlestar Galactica, we cast Jackie as the voice of the computer, and she was the voice of the computer in every episode featured, working against those actors, getting residuals. So that is also voice work. So when you come in for walla, there's two basic categories. Sometimes 8 people are up making the background of the hospital or the prison or the church youth group or whatever it is. And then there's solo things. There's a cop who says, pull the vehicle over through the bullhorn.
Yeah.
You never see him, but you see the cop car. He might even walk up and you see his body and whatever, but you never see him. A lot of times the actor's like, driver's license and registration, please, because you're shooting over the cop's shoulder to the inside of the car. You don't see his head. So a lot of those characters on set are extras, but they pay the actor to do the voice. That happens all the time.
So are these actors primarily actors who can do a lot of different voices, like have a wide range?
Some people are just very good at sounding average. And when I say that, they don't have a funny voice or an accent that sticks out if they're just chatty conversation at a restaurant. They're not too boomy. They don't have a funny foreign tone. They don't have a raspy voice. So some people just can, and I think the key thing before a skill set that is diverse is having solid improv skills. Solid improv skills, because there is no script, and you have to have a conversation. Like we'll have walk and talk conversations. So if there's 8 people, I'll say, you 2 are going to pair up, and you 2 are going to pair up, and you 3 are going to pair up, and you're all just going to have little conversations. You're going to walk in a circle, walk by the mic in a circle, and you just have to go with the conversation. If you're at school, if it's parent back to school night, you have to be willing to talk about Billy and blah blah and his grades, SAT scores, and blah blah blah. If you're at NASA, you need to be able to talk about aerospace and blah blah. Now the real working people have 3-ring binders they come with. Here's NASA stuff, and here's CIA stuff, and here's cowboy terminology, and here's cop radio calls. 10 is code 7. Code 7 means I'm taking lunch, right?
Wow.
So really knowing specific industries that television likes, medical, military, those sort of things is very good, and knowing the nomenclature and syntax and way that stuff is presented.
So hopefully what's sinking in for those of you listening is that we are constantly trying to create content. Now, sometimes we're creating content because we just have stories to tell and we just want to create, stories with people and build our reels or start, putting things into festivals or that kind of thing to try to, grow our careers. Or sometimes we feel pressure from our agents or managers saying, I don't want to just use self-tapes to promote you. I want to have something more substantial. So go shoot a scene or go shoot a short or produce that kind of stuff. So whether we do it for ourselves or because we're trying to satisfy our team, many of us end up looking into producing our own content. But because we're actors primarily, we can tend to focus on just the video portion and our acting, but one of the most common pitfalls of any amateur or semi-pro produced piece is terrible sound.
Well, not only terrible sound, listen, Spielberg said sound is half the film. And if you say concentrate on your acting, you're not making a silent movie. The way you communicate with people, the way you are genuine is not about how good your face looks or what you do with your hands or how the scene is blocked. Is your dialogue genuine? And the way it works for an audience, I've had to break it down differently than you, and I've been trained differently than you, but we kind of arrive at the same place. When you go to a film and you see a bad visual effect, bad fire or a lion that wasn't real, a lot of times you'll look at it and you'll say, oh, that fire's not right. That looks so fake. Now, if you're not in the visual effects business, you don't know why it looks fake. You look at one frame, looks like real fire, but for some reason it doesn't blend with the background, it doesn't feel like it's doesn't move right in the wind, whatever. You know it's not right, and you don't know why. Voice performance is very much the same. You listen to people all day, every day, and within certain tolerances, you find them to be believable and true or suspicious and false. I don't think they're being honest with me, right? That is all about how people deliver dialogue. A little bit how they hold their hands, how they hold their bodies. But so I think that genuine performance is really understanding the motivation for the emotions. And in your video clip that you played me earlier, you mentioned Meryl Streep and in connecting with who you are more than trying to be someone who you are not, and infusing those genuine emotions. Here's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is you don't make a conscious decision when you're yelling at someone. I'm going to make this line of dialogue louder, and I'm going to make this one quieter. It comes out just like breathing and walking, all natural. You don't think one thing about it. The finest actors don't think one thing about it. But here's where it gets tricky. You laugh hundreds of times a day, okay? Hundreds of times a day. And you hear people laugh, little chuckles and big belly laughs and everything else. However, when you have to fake laugh, your boss tells a joke, your mom tells a joke, it always sounds, it doesn't translate as, now why is that? Because we have hundreds of examples every day of our own laugh that's real. You'd think that if you had to pull a fake one off, those 100 times would be a reference, but they're not, because the difference is this one is manufactured. This one has to sound like the real ones, but is not. And I think it originates from a different place in people's heads. So I think saying that people have to connect with themselves is completely accurate, but it doesn't tell them anything they need to do to get there.
So you've said you've had to, well, before we get into even your casting choices and some of what you've learned working with all this voice talent, I want people to understand what a sound design supervisor is, right? So if they go on your IMDb and they look at a bunch of your credits, it says sound design supervisor. So what is that job?
Here's what a supervising sound editor is, and you have them in single camera, television, feature film, everything. But that person is responsible for the complete audio landscape of the show. On set, you have a location sound guy who does the boom and the headphones on. And after the film is shot and the picture editor assembles picture, since picture and sound are shot separately, the first challenge is we need to assemble the dialogue. And what that means is in a shot where you and I are talking and you see the back of my head over my shoulder and I see you, you still hear my dialogue in that take. And we cut back. Sometimes you're on a shot of you, but you hear me, and vice versa. If we use the literal sound from those shots, you would use my dialogue from your angle. However, when we cut to me and I'm talking, we want the whole thing built audio from my angle, but visually from different angles. So the dialogue has to be assembled in a way where it's smooth and doesn't sound choppy. And oftentimes the dialogue you're hearing does not come from the shot you're seeing. So that's the first thing, is to assemble a smooth dialogue track. Then you have to go through and choose all your ADR lines. And ADR is just dialogue that is recorded after the fact. Maybe the director was yelling directions. Maybe you flubbed a take. Maybe they want to have an added line. All that stuff is scripted afterwards and the actor is brought in. The next element is your sound effects, which is 3 parts. Your Foley sound effects, those are the footsteps and cloth movement and things that are performed. You see people break celery or something like that. That's Foley. You have your hard effects, which are like your gunshots, cars, that kind of stuff. And your backgrounds, birds, wind, all that. So your supervising sound editor is in charge of that, gives notes to the Foley crew, gives notes to the sound design crew, gives notes to the dialogue editor, sometimes is that person as well, one of those people. And then they bring all those elements to a stage. It's like a little movie theater. The composer submits their music. You take the music from the composer, the sound effects that you built, and the dialogue from production, and it's all mixed together in surround or Atmos or stereo or whatever.
Sounds like so much work.
But the real trick is to make it all sound seamless, since we have some Walla Group actors who weren't there, some lines that we shot a month after the performance, right? Backgrounds that were never part of the backgrounds, and backgrounds that we own in production that we don't want, right? God, I wish there wasn't a plane flying overhead in that shot. It's a perfect take, right? So you have to take all those things and diminish the plane and make the sound like it actually happened on the day. And
now, how much time does that take for your typical hour-long show?
There's a different landscape in television now than it used to be. You have everything from basic cable to premium stuff like HBO and Starz. So they all have different timelines. Traditionally, you watch a network show, CSI, something like that, usually it's 2 days on a dub stage. So the sound crew, after the picture editor has locked picture, which means that's the cut you see on TV, The sound crew then gets a week to build the show, bring the actors in, record the loop lines, and at the end of that week, they are then on a mix stage for 2 days with the executive producer, sometimes the director, and the studio executives for mix and playback.
Oh, the studio executives are there for the mix and playback.
Sometimes, depends on the studio.
Interesting. So the total amount of time on average was about 7 business days.
Yeah, a week turn on each show.
Wow. All right. And
Wait,
so,
can we go back just for a second
Whatever you
to
want to.
this Walla group thing? Because I've never heard of this. And I
it's
have a feeling there's a lot of actors that are
Well, here's what's going
wanting
to happen.
in on
Well,
this.
because your fellow actors who are in Walla Group don't want you to know about it.
Right. This is a
It is,
secret.
not only is it great for your act, I mean, it keeps you totally up. It keeps your skills. It's like going to the gym every day.
And
right?
where do you go to find these actors? Are you using the same people over and over again?
It's a very close community like anything else. So yes, there are several people. I think Riff Hutton is a great actor. You can look up. He's on camera. He's been on JAG, and he was years ago he was the Kentucky Fried Chicken guy. Like in a campaign for theirs that went on for years. A working actor, and he runs a Walla Group. Dave Jolliffe, who is involved in the union, runs a Walla Group. I did Gossip Girl for 6 seasons with him. I did The Agency for
my
CBS
gosh.
with him. And Dave is a great guy, and he runs a Walla Group. But what will happen is, in Riff's group, hey, Dave is there today. In Dave's group, oh, hey, he called Riff in. So there are key people. The guy named W.K. Stratton, who's a great guy and a very talented actor, he has a Walla Group. There's a guy named Harry Johnson, which I think is a terrible name, but he has. but Harry, who's a talented guy, has a fantastic group. And a lot of these people, and I feel bad because there's so many people I've worked with who I'm not naming, and there's some people intentionally I'm not naming. But there's really a great group of people out there. And once you ask around, when you talk, you might know Dave, right? And if you don't know Dave, Sean knows Dave. Once you ask around, you're going to find your way to one person who does it with some degree of regularity. That person can then hip you to what you need to do, but it's very difficult to get into. It is worth the effort. The more you have, and listen, it's a lot reciprocity. Certainly you need to have the skill, but your fellow actors are going to be motivated if you have something. Oh, I can get you an audition for so-and-so, or oh, I can help you read for such and such, or oh, a friend of mine's at the union, maybe I can. I'm just saying that seems to be how it works.
well, now there's been such an explosion in content creation, from all these different online streaming networks and the traditional networks and stuff. So you would think that there'd be much more opportunities.
Here's the blowback. The blowback is this. The blowback is, we really can't afford 8 actors on the show. We're going to have 6 or 4. Can we get away with 3 actors? Well, we have a whole scene in a nightclub. Can we multi-track them? We have 2 girls and 1 guy, and we're going to make it sound like a club of 1,000 people. So the additional challenge you get is, as you have more content, the budget gets spread thinner, and as the budget gets spread thinner, they have fewer. So those people who were working all the time now find, hey, now it was going to be 8 actors. Now we have 4, right?
Now,
so it's harder to get
in
into.
your position, and again, is it you said what? Because I said sound design supervisor, but what did you say the title?
Supervising sound editor.
Supervising sound editor. Is there a union that you belong to as a supervising sound editor?
Yeah, it's IATSE, Local 700.
Okay, the Local 700. Is it strictly for audio professionals?
Well, you have, we're in the same union as picture editors. So picture and sound editors are lumped together.
Okay, great.
Wrongfully so, but lumped together.
Are you involved at all in the Local 700?
I'm only involved with my issues and complaints about how they've managed the business. I'm not here to talk about my issues with the sound union, but my biggest problem is this. Actors get residuals. Writers get residuals. Directors get residuals. Musicians get residuals. Okay? Even someone who comes in and says, pull the vehicle over, they get residuals. But the guy who designs the lightsaber for Star Wars does not get residuals. Kids make that sound themselves. That sound is added to toys. You can hear it and not see the movie and know, hey, Star Wars is on. Or hey, there's the Jurassic Park dinosaur. So even if 90% of the sound department, editors who are not designers, don't get residuals, sound designers should get it. And our union has never once gone after it. Never once. And I got to tell you, a lot of times, in a horror film, Friday the 13th, they say, which actually, that was Harry Manfredini did that. It was actually kill ma. It was kill ma. That's what it was. But people make fun of that, right? That's the sound designer. That person doesn't get any residuals, which I think is terrible. So shame on the union for that.
Yeah. Well, interesting. So, yeah, because you know how involved I am in my own union of SAG-AFTRA. So I'm always curious to see how different professionals in our industry are with either a local of IATSE or with the DGA, WGA, the Editors Guild. There's like 40 some odd different divisions of professional unions in our industry.
My union seems to be stuck on maintaining their place and not expanding opportunities and income potential for the people they claim to represent. That's the problem with my union.
Yeah, well, I think
But
that's
I need them to. I'm thankful because I can't work on a network show or a cable show without being a union member. But I don't think I think a lot of of my union, and I don't know how it is with yours, but there is a contingent of old guard at our union who is more interested in maintaining the union structure and their current cash flow than spending money to represent the people they make money to represent.
Would you say a lot of the people in your community are not very involved in their union's politics or in its organization?
Yeah, I think most sound editors and supervising sound editors I know are not involved, although oftentimes you'll see people who are running for positions with the union or board member positions. Oh, hey, I know that guy. Oh, he runs this sound company. And so a lot of the people who do run are some of the higher profile people But as far as, the guy in the next bay working on, Game of Thrones or CSI or Ray Donovan or whatever, a lot of those guys aren't involved. They just kind of gripe.
So I want to segue into two topics related to you working with performers in your sessions. So the first one is that there are some performers you can't choose to work with because they're already the cast of the show or that kind of thing, right? And then there's the opportunities you have to actually bring in voice talent for different projects.
And there's something in between those two. I for years I did ancillary work for at the time Miramax, but like I had to do a director's cut of Reservoir Dogs, okay? And in the director's cut of Reservoir Dogs, which came out after the film, we had ADR lines for Tim Roth, we had ADR lines for Tarantino, we had ADR lines for Michael Madsen, and those people were not always available.
What are ADR lines?
That's ADR it's automated dialogue replacement, ADR, automatic dialogue replacement, which is all it means is an actor on set spoke a line that we need to re-record because they said something wrong, or you sounded too angry, we want you to be more compassionate, or can you have more of a smile or a chuckle? So that's ADR. And so these scenes that would normally have been ADR'd for the feature, now in a director's cut or an airline version or a cut down or a promo might need a piece of dialogue that was not in the original production, even as released. So I had to bring in Tim Roth and Tarantino and Michael Madsen. Well, I got Michael Madsen, who I thought was terrific, but I didn't get the other two, and I had to find a voice double for Tim Roth, and I had to find a voice double for Tarantino. Now, some people have their voice doubles, like Schwarzenegger. When if he's on set or he shoots a film, already out of the gate, hey, you got to call, so-and-so, because that's the good person. But oftentimes the supervising sound editor has to cast those voice doubles. And you don't hire an impressionist, but a lot of working actors find they're very good at certain voice ranges. So there's certain people who they're my first call for that voice double work. Funny thing is, with Tim Roth, he wanted to approve of the lines before they were released. He couldn't make it, but he wanted to approve of the lines. And when I sent him what we had done, he said that person sounded more like him than he did.
Wow.
So that's the middle ground where you have.
Well, that's just another thing. So
like
because
double.
You have your humana work, you also have straight ahead performance stuff. People on TV that you're driving in a truck and you turn on the radio and there's a weather forecast or breaking news. Okay, well we need a news reporter. Now if I have someone who sounds like a news reporter, even better. But that's something that I have to cast. So when I call my Walla group, I'll say, listen, we need it's high school and blah blah, but I need a Spanish language news reporter, and I need someone who knows real prison lingo.
Now, this sounds like this is all going through personal relationships, not through agencies.
100% personal relationships.
Wow.
Yes.
100%, and you'll find it at every level. You'll find it at the director level. You'll find it at the cast level. Sometimes cast members, hey, my friend Joe's an actor, I'd love him to be in the Walla group. Or the director, hey, my wife so-and-so, I want her to be in the Walla group. But for actors, you have a few avenues you can take. You can, of course, approach other actors who do it and find your way. You'll ask 4 or 5 working actors and you'll find someone who's done Walla work. You can also find your way to supervising sound editors. They can request that the Walla group leader, hey, can you consider Sean Sharma? He'd be so terrific, right? You can also go through directors. If the director tells the Walla group supervisor, that the person who runs the Walla group, hey, I want you to use Sean Sharma, they're going to use Sean Sharma. That's just going to be that. So You're not stuck with one way in, but there is no right way in.
But it really sheds light on the fact that, we've talked in the past about the 4 paths to success, which of course are to go through industry, what we call like the traditional way, like getting an agent and going on auditions and booking work and that kind of thing, which is what most actors attempt to do. And then the second one is to build industry relationships. The third one is create your own content. The fourth one is social media. But when we talk to building industry relationships, people don't necessarily know that so much work is not put out through agencies. It's through personal relationships.
And it's not even through your own department. A lot of that work is not found through your fellow actor. I mean, if I wanted to do walla work, I would not pursue actors. I would pursue co-producers who are also associate producers on shows. Those are the people who are in charge of all the post-production process. That associate producer on a show staff can get you in there. The director can get you in there. The studio executive can get you in there. The supervising sounder can get you in there. So you have lots of ways to get in there. And as I said, you get residuals. People, I know people. And by the way, so when you come for a walla session, it's a day contract like any, it's a full day, even if you're there for 5 minutes. Most walla group sessions seem to go down, a CSI kind of show, seem to go down in about 3 to 5 hours. A lot of actors who are in the do 2 sessions a day. They got a morning session at Universal and an afternoon session at Warner Brothers, and they might do that 4 or 5 times a week. If you got 2 contracts a day, 4 or 5 times a week, every episode of a series, and you're on something for years,
that's pretty good.
It's and not only is it good, hey, I'm making great money, but it keeps your skill set so high. And a lot of times on the stage, depending on the show, you'll find the producer is there, or the director is there, or the production exec that is there that day because Reese Witherspoon is coming and you got to leave the stage and Reese comes on, but they're there. And it gives you an opportunity to make those relationships. And in sound, versus being on set, I think you have, it's funny because it's sort of the hind end of the horse being in sound. However, in sound, I deal with the stars, the director, the studio executive, the producers. Those are the people, I'm not just, it's not like makeup and I never even get to meet the people who are, and nothing against makeup, but I'm saying in sound you have access to the decision makers. At other places, you might show up on set and never meet the decision makers. So it's an opportunity for every actor to really get some face time with people.
So what kinds of performers then really impress you? What kind of actors do you like to work with? What are the hallmarks of actors that make your job easy that you really appreciate?
Well, first of all, people who come prepared with ideas are great. People who, I don't like teaching. I don't mind directing, but I don't really care to teach, and especially in this environment, like it's almost like it's like training an actor. When someone comes to set is the wrong time to learn basic technique, and it could be something so simple as where do I stand or where should I look. Okay, that kind of stuff really wastes time. And in what I do and what you do, listen, if we're on a stage and it's $600 an hour and I got 4 union people there, well, I'm not wasting 1 minute, and we've scheduled it so this is a 2-hour session and this actor's coming at this time, and this star's coming in at 3, and this person's coming in at 4. We can't push our session. So people who are effective and people who are easy to work with, and of course experience is always helpful, but really people who come prepared is what I look for.
So I want to ask you about podcasting because there's so many people. I feel like every other person is starting their own podcast.
Yes, there's 660,000 right now. 660,000 are currently produced.
Yeah, because I mean it's great. It's a great avenue to get your opinion and perspective out there. But I'm wondering for actors who want to do this, who want to start their own podcasts and aren't necessarily the most educated in the technology, what are some things that we can do, like if we have a low budget, and still we want to sound good, like in terms of software, microphones, what do you think is a good way to do that?
I think software and microphones are a lot like headshots, okay? Just because you spend $1,000 instead of $100 doesn't mean you're getting what you need, and it doesn't mean that your show's going to sound any better. You just want to be to the acceptable standard. Now, in what I do, I always want to be to my personal highest standard. But as far as putting a show out and being successful, you don't need that microphone that's going to have a dynamic range that you would record the Boston Pops with or Pavarotti's voice with. Okay? So beyond an acceptable standard, microphones can be very humble. As far as software goes, there's free software you can download that companies, major companies, are using to currently edit and produce their podcasts. So, really, it's about your number one issue is going to be an effective storyteller. If you can tell a story, if it's news, if it's informative, if it's scripted, if you can provide your audience with a story, your technology and quality is going to be secondary. If you have great quality and no story, you have nothing. If you have story and shitty quality and it's poorly edited and the show is too long, I can talk to you. Oh, I heard a podcast was so much fun what this person said. You got to listen, right? So really, content is more important than quality. But as far as quality goes, I don't know what to tell people about how to improve their quality, because every audio professional I know has been trained to listen. And a lot like the way you walk and talk, it is second nature. You hear it and it's wrong and you know what you need to do. And as far as telling other people what they need to do, they need to get some experience is what they need. They need to, ask a friend who's an engineer to sit in with them so they kind of understand what it is they should be looking for. Once it clicks, they'll know every time. So I just think it's, next time you're an actor and you go in to shoot an ADR session, pay attention to what the engineer's doing and pay attention to what's going on with the microphones, because, actors are always surrounded by sound. Unless you've worked in silent movies. I don't care if it's theater or film.
So just a couple of technical things, right? You might want to have a quiet location that doesn't have a lot of reflective surfaces.
Absolutely.
Right? Another technical thing is that when is it appropriate to use a lavalier and what is a lavalier, just so people know that term?
A lavalier is the microphones that we are wearing now, which you will see on shows like Bill Maher, and they're clipped onto people's ties and people's lapels. Actors on set oftentimes have them hidden in their hair. But those are the little stealth microphones that allow us to be unobstructed by visually obnoxious microphones.
And you're not tethered, because you can have a mic pack on you that it's connected to.
Although the problem is, in these little microphones, the diaphragm is very small. And the larger diaphragm you have in your microphone.
What is a diaphragm?
It's it's like a disc that picks up sound. There's a ribbon microphone that has like almost a thread, and as you talk, that thread vibrates just like your vocal cords, and the sound is then recorded out. It's called a ribbon mic. Those are beautiful, but they're very directional. I have to be right on. If I'm this way or that way, it's not going to sound right. With a large diaphragm microphone, I can be over here or over there, and it sounds great. The problem is that thing is picking up so much that if you're not in an acoustically perfect room, you're going to hear the air conditioning, you're going to hear the building settle, you're going to hear rumbles. You're going to hear things that your ears don't hear, much in the way when you take a picture with your phone, it doesn't look like what your eyes see. Oh, the sunset doesn't look like that. I was hoping I would get That's how microphones are. You got to choose the right microphone. It's just like a camera lens, because it doesn't hear the way your ear does. There are microphones called binaural microphones that do hear the way your ear does.
Okay. When I do my own voiceover stuff at home, I go into my closet because there's just lots of clothes everywhere.
That's great.
And all
That's
that.
what I tell people to do.
Yeah.
That when I used to teach voiceover and train voice, I would always that was my.
But if you're doing a podcast with guests, it might be weird to bring them into your bedroom closet.
A little claustrophobic.
Exactly.
What about, I have one of these sort of, I don't even know what it's called, but it's like a metal.
Like an acoustic shield?
Instead of going into a room, it's a shield that goes around. What do you think about those?
I
could still return it.
I've seen those. I've seen those things. I can't remember who makes them, but you talk right. It goes like that.
Right. So that you can move anywhere. And
I have totally seen those, but I have no opinion on that, because I have been so spoiled by my exposure to acoustics that I have never had to deal with anything like that.
Yeah.
So it would be fun to play around with, but I can't speak to that.
So when would you use an actual microphone versus a lavalier microphone that clips on?
If I was
see podcasters all the time with those, like Joe Rogan on his podcast has this like arm, and it's got this one particular kind of like mic, whatever.
Well, there's a very kind of, if you're doing a Joe Rogan show,
Yeah.
You're looking for a certain kind of on radio sound, that Howard Stern sound, that Dick Clark sound, that classic DJ sound, and people use mics like an EV20 and those sort of mics for that. But that is not conversation. That is not like the real world. So, but I think if you're doing a straight ahead radio show, interview show, something like an EV20 would be a great choice. But if you're doing something that is more conversational, like what we're doing, I think a lav gives you a lot of freedom, where I don't have a set of headphones on, and I don't have a big condenser mic right in front of me. Where there's essentially something is blocking half my face when I want to talk to you. So again, I'm an audio professional, but still, this allows us better performance. Would a great condenser mic give us better audio? Yes, it would. But you don't need to be better than what these microphones are, and what these buy us is comfort and presentation and story. So all things considered, it is the way to go. You could deliver a pizza faster than a Ferrari, but it's not the way to do it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that analogy. So in terms of the software, you know, like I also coming from a music background, got familiar with Pro Tools, which is, but I haven't, you know, used that with any podcasting stuff yet. But I know there's other things that are common in the voiceover space, like Twisted Wave and stuff. Yeah, Audacity.
Audacity is what I hear most from people who are consumers with little experience, and it's a very simple program to use. It doesn't have a lot of the features that I would want, but can you record? Can you edit? Can you produce? Yes. So Audacity is the first thing that I encounter. As a matter of fact, there is one of the largest podcast companies in the world that has celebrity titles and lots of money and offices in Beverly Hills. Many of their shows are edited on Audacity.
And that's just a free piece of software.
It's a free piece of software that's very limited in what it can do, but you're also limited in the mistakes you can make. So.
Yeah, if it's too complicated, it can be overwhelming. I've been using Twisted Wave, and I feel like that's approachable.
A lot of voiceover people seem to use Twisted Wave when they take, consumer kind of voiceover classes. They suggest they use Twisted Wave. But if you're going to go and record a Bear commercial or a Ford commercial or any of those sort of things, your audio is edited in Pro Tools 90% of the time.
Is that's still the industry standard?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely the industry standard at Universal, Warner Brothers, Disney, Sony, Paramount, Fox.
Which is so interesting because that's the same tool we use in music.
A lot of people use Logic in music, I find as well. But yes, I for music editing, it's great.
So when you were coaching voiceover, what were some of the things that you found were like the most common mistakes that voiceover actors make that you were always sort of coaching people on?
Well, I was coaching voice, not voiceover. When voiceover is part of it. So coaching voice performance, voiceover is, Advil, nothing is longer lasting or more effective. In a recent study, that's voiceover. I think something that most actors don't seem to understand is that their voice comes from essentially 3 different places. Okay, you have, if you're doing that kind of voiceover thing, then you want to engage your diaphragm right here. And that gives you more boom, more presence, more confidence. Okay, and that's where your traditional VO host comes from. Then you have a throat voice right here. Like if you're going to talk to a child, or if I'm going to be really intimate with you, I'm going to say, you know what, I want to tell you something, and it's really important to me, so I want you to listen. I don't use this kind of voice. That's going to be threatening. That's going to be very authoritative. So you have your throat voice, and then you have your heady voice up here, kind of nasally voice, which is where you get Bart Simpson and things like that. And the key, you do this organically. If you're arguing with your boyfriend or talking in the car on the phone, organically you switch between those zones in your voice. But a lot of people who act just choose one and go with it. It's like wearing one color every day.
Right.
So
instead of consciously making the decision about where you want to be.
Yeah, because each part is used for something different. But the people who have music training, which is where I started, oftentimes have control of that diaphragm. People who've never had that training don't even understand what that is or how to connect with it.
Right.
So,
how did you get started in music?
I played piano from the time I was 3. I sang in a nationally touring men and boys choir where I got a lot of great training from a choir director named Tony Furnival. Really taught me a lot about voice from the time I was in 6th grade. And then I came out to LA and I started working in music and sound.
Wow. As an intern, did you sort of work your way up?
I had a job selling keyboards at Nadine's Music in Hollywood. And someone came in from A&M Records and said, does anybody know the Emulator 3, which was, at that time was a $12,000 sampling keyboard, and in the in the early 90s, that was a lot of money to spend for a sampling keyboard. And I said, I do. They said, great, Herb Alpert needs some help over at A&M. That's the A of A&M Records. So I go to A&M Records and I meet Herb, and he's on the Chaplin sound stage, which is where Charlie Chaplin used to shoot his movies on the A&M lot. And his band is set up there because he's prepping for a tour. The whole band is there, and I go in, and it's like at a private show from Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, and they needed someone to do all of their keyboard programming. what are the sounds going to be for tour, and how do we name the patches? That we want a patch that says pachanga that sounds like this, and we want an organ patch, and so I did all their synthesizer programming, which was the last time I ever worked at Nadine's Music in Hollywood. Although, Derek, thank you for the job if you're out there somewhere and still alive. And that led me to work with Don Henley, who was in Studio A. And that led me to work with a guy named Derek Bramble, who was a bass player for the band Heatwave. They were British. They were a British funk band. They did Groove Line and Always and Forever. So Derek was a record producer, and he liked what I did. He brought me onto his production crew. And, whenever he had to produce a record for Warner Brothers or Motown or, whomever, I was one of the guys who was a player and a programmer on his record. And I ended up working with a guy named Steve Harvey, who was a Scottish record producer, and that led me to producing independently for Motown and Warner Brothers and Paisley Park and people like that. And and music led to sound. It's all sound work. But I think the best people in sound are musicians.
That makes sense.
Even if they don't make their money in music, the best people who are recording sound, the best people who are mixing movies. One of my favorite mixers is Steve Maslow is his name. Great feature mixer. If you look up his credits, it's like every movie you've ever watched. That guy in the 70s was mixing, Boogie Oogie Oogie till you just can't boogie no more. He was, mixing the Bee Gees and mixing Taste of Honey and mixing. That guy knows how to listen.
Wow.
Okay, so a couple more questions here. The first one is I want to talk about your attitude, your presence.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
In the sense that I remember when we first became friends and I would call you and you would pick up the phone, the way you would always answer is, how can I help?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do always answer, how can I help? And
to me, that is such a good example of the presence that you've had in my life, and I know so many others in which you are such.
All of my clients comment on it, my friends comment on it, and but the truth is, my phone rings, and I know that someone who I know, they're usually not calling to share an anecdote. They have a production problem or blah 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 or this or that or whatever. So just organic, like by the phone, and say, how can I help?
Yeah.
But I mean it, and I do want to contribute. So much so, in fact, that Sean Cassidy, who's a longtime client, a good friend of mine, is currently the producer on a show called New Amsterdam. It's the hospital show. And there, his lead character, the guy who runs the hospital, always says, how can I help? And Sean called me and he said, hey, have you watched New Amsterdam? I said, no. Why? He said, one of my characters says, how can I help? Well, I'll turn that off. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So he said one of his characters, the guy who runs the hospital, I'm turning my phone off. One of his characters, the guy who runs the hospital, always says, how can I help? And in the pilot episode where he was the new hospital administrator, there's a scene where he goes into the conference room with all the staff at the hospital and a whole lot, but how can I help? Really? You tell me how I can help you. This is this is why I'm here. And really, I think that's why I'm here. I'm here to support production at any level. So,
I mean, it's so clear. I mean, you've been the driving force behind getting this podcast going. You've been so supportive, always saying, we rise together, right? By supporting other people. And even when we were texting yesterday, you said that there's a Jewish saying. What is it? It's
when people go aliyah. Aliyah is a Hebrew expression. It's the rising up. And really it means when Jews go to Israel to embrace that. But socially what it's meant to mean is that the rising up is we all rise up. Your children stand on your shoulders and do better than you. And those children stand, and that's the way with your community and your friends. I want you to make more money than I do. I want you to be more successful than I am. And when you get there, you're going to pull me up too. When I get there, I'm going to pull you up too. That's how it works.
I found that just about every high-level professional in this industry has that attitude. That I find so many of the people that I've interacted with are just the most down-to-earth, lovely, passionate people, because the way you move forward in our industry, by and large, is often by being indispensable, by making yourself so valuable to other people that they can't work or they don't want to work without you. And then you find people that are reliable and dependable, that come through, that pay attention to details, that are thorough. And so you can trust that when you work with them, they've got that department or that part of the project covered, and you don't need to worry about them. So finding those kinds of dependable people they tend to be very giving and supportive in that.
That's how I hire my actors. I call those people who I'm dependable, who I can depend on. I call those actors who I can depend on, who have a quality peer group, who are easy to work with, who don't expect things if they do something.
What's an example of an actor who, not a particular name, but what is the kind of behavior of an actor that makes them hard to work with?
Good question.
Oh, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, when you're in a session with someone, some actors don't take direction very well. And it's not that they're doing anything wrong or right, or that that one line doesn't work on its own, but you have to remember when you're recording a line of dialogue, it has to fit into a scene. If I'm going to have an added line for you, when I cut back to you, you're saying a line, and you could have a soft voice, right? But if you're going to be like, I'm not going to do that, and then we cut to the soft voice, it's not going to work, because it's not going to sound like a natural conversation. But some actors will question why they're doing lines. We're all professionals. If you were doing a student film, I understand. But if you're in a room full of Emmy winners and Oscar winners and people who do it every day, just like JS said in his, it's a division of labor process. And if you don't respect the people you're working with, you probably shouldn't be working with them. That's the most sincere. You know, if you hire someone to do sound, you let them do sound. You hire
Where do you
an
think
actor,
that resistance comes from?
ego, ego, and lack of respect. And like you say, when you see those people who are really established, those people have the experience. They've already learned the lesson. I have found that sometimes it's the new talent, someone who just got on a hit show, or someone who has an expectation of what the industry is that is not learned through experience. Those people are the most difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and also it's the actor's job to translate so that whatever message they're being given, they have to be able to translate into something that they can give a different result.
Yeah. A lot of actors want to know why they're doing a line.
Right. Which
Why,
is like
why am I doing this
which
line?
is our job
who
to
asked,
figure
who
out.
asked for it?
Right.
Who asked for this line and why am I doing it? Well, listen, the line has to be done, and we're all there's a reason that
Interesting.
there's a reason we're paying $600 an hour, and all these people are here, and we have to be on the stage tomorrow, and you know, I have to answer to the guy who plays the ice cream man why he's recording, why he has
Just
to record.
do it.
So I always find that kind of disturbing, because it really it's on the list. It's been typed up and printed out. You know, when you're reading a script, you don't say, "Why am I saying this line?" All you're doing is reading a script.
You've made a comment on, you know, the project that we just did together about the actors being on time. Is it that common that actors are not on time?
Yes. Yeah. Listen, I did a project, and I did a project where Casey Affleck, we had a limo at his apartment, and they were banging on the door, and people were waiting for this session, and you know, I mean. That's just, and when people show up late and you can't start the session, yeah, I mean, especially Walla group, if there's 7 people there and you have an 8-person group, if one person doesn't show up, you might wait 15, 20 minutes for them before you start without them, and that's a good amount of time to lose in a day where your session is 4 hours. That's a measurable percentage of your time, and that's going to make you go over on the back end. It's just, it's so unprofessional.
Yeah, just basic professionalism already weeds out a lot of people.
Yes. A lot of working actors who probably have all the skill and all the training and all the looks they need, but you know what? It's like a waiter who has attitude. You can go somewhere and have a great meal, and you'll leave and say, I'm never going back to that restaurant again.
And that's the thing that actors, I think, miss a lot of times, is that, you know, it isn't just about your skill as a performer, it is also your effect on others around you.
People have to not mind that you're going to be successful.
I love that.
It's true.
Well, it's the first thing you ask when you meet a celebrity is like somebody says, were they nice? It's like the first question anybody asks when they meet somebody. They want to know that the person deserves their success, and part of deserving it is being a good person. You know?
It's such a communal business. It's like everyone is so, I think that's also partly why we love it and why we get into it. Every job has so many components, so many people doing what they do.
It's such a collaboration.
It's all relational. Yeah.
It's such a team sport, you know, like you can go out and do a single person show out there in the theater circuit, but when it comes to anything on camera, it's a team sport no matter what.
Totally.
And in that vein, you know, what is it, when you talk about some performers are hard to work with, I can imagine one of those things would be actors that don't trust themselves, that start to downward spiral, that start to, you know, feel like when you're giving them a note that it's a criticism as opposed to just an exploration. Can you speak to that?
Well, you get that a lot. What they do is they explain to you Oh, well, on the day the director wanted me, he wanted this, but they cut the middle of the scene out, right? So a lot of times what will happen is we shot a scene, you walk in, you have an argument with your wife, blah, blah, you kiss her and you leave. Well, they cut out half that argument, right? So the actor's gonna come in, well, why do they want me to be that mad? Well, at that time, that's how the scene was cut. But now a lot of that anger has been removed. So when you say this line, we need a softer take, right? But they feel that they're being criticized because their performance was wrong, when all that happened was the show evolved. And so when we thought we wanted spicy, but this mild serves us better. Doesn't mean that we don't like spicy, it's just the wrong place for it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So being flexible.
Well, it goes on all the time. Actors will. I get this on stage, which is a big waste of my time. I remember I did Wayward Pines with Matt Dillon, and I thought he was terrific. I loved Matt Dillon. He was always lots of fun. But he would come in and he would say, there was a close-up of me in that scene. Why didn't they use that close-up? He always wanted to know why certain close-ups that were shot were not used. So he would come into loop. But he was only interested in the way he viewed the show, not the viewer's experience, which is fine. As I said, he was great to work with, but that wastes a lot of stage time. So a lot of questions about why did the director do this, or why didn't they cut this out, or why did they use this shot? But as far as you're talking about being gracious and being easy to work with. I'll give you a casting example. I did a show called Channel Zero for Sci-Fi Channel. And in the show Channel Zero, they had, every time children would walk by a TV set and their parents weren't around, it would flicker on and a demonic, cartoon would come on and the puppets would talk to the kids and, they would flicker off when the parents walked in. And they had recorded those lines in Canada for the puppets. And the studio didn't like the voice talent. They were not happy with it. And so I said to them, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I said, I will recast all the voice talent in this cartoon. I'll give you one shot at each actor. And if you don't like my picks, you can, go to an agency or go to your casting department. And I just called the people whom I had worked with, who had the right, if they had done character voices or animation voices or someone who could be, 15 different people in a show. I looked at each character. I thought, in my experience, I'm going to call the people who I've worked with, who can deliver, who are great to work with, who always have ideas. And everyone I called on first go around were the people who ended up in 12 episodes that season. So those actors got 12-day contracts and residuals. And that was not traditional casting. So if an actor can find their way to a supervising sound editor, there's plenty of opportunities for supervising sound editors to do that. If you have a special skill, even better. If you say, hey, I speak Arabic as well, great, because half the time we're doing these, if I'm doing a CIA project, they're listening to a phone call, I need some Arabic. So any special skill you can promote oftentimes will get you in there if you don't have a peer group who can.
Now, a technical thing, you talk about capturing sound as shooting it. Just like if you were shooting something with a camera, when you're talking about capturing the audio, you say, let's shoot that audio. That to me was a discovery. I didn't know you guys used the same term.
Well, it's not, it's like writing, if you're writing a technical manual, that's one style of writing. If you're writing a poem or a screenplay, that is another. And if you are just recording stuff, I'm recording a guide to do this or some very basic information for an answering machine message, that's one thing. But if you are actually involved as a storyteller, you're going to have to think about, just like I said, the microphone is a camera lens for sound. Okay, it's a lens for sound. So you're going to think about, how am I going to shoot this, and how is the voice going to translate, and how is that going to appeal to the listener when they hear it? Just recording something clean, anybody can do. That's a technical job.
Yeah.
Being a sound designer or a voice director or a supervising sound editor is a creative job, not a technical job.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so this is my last big question for you. And I'm sure everybody listening to this who heard me say this at the beginning is wondering about this too, which is, it's not often we get a chance to talk to an Emmy Award-winning professional in this business. What did you win your Emmy for, and what impact did that have on your life?
It was for Battlestar Galactica, which was the remake of Battlestar that was on the Sci-Fi Channel, and it was really the first big splash that Sci-Fi Channel had. I was very fortunate in that show in that there were two executive producers on the show, Ron Moore, who is a fantastic writer and showrunner. Outlander is his show now. He had done Carnival before that for HBO. And David Icke. David Icke used to be president of the USA Network. Okay, and he was a studio executive, turned executive producer, and so I won for that show. And that show had a lot of great. I got to work with Edward James Olmos, and really some
Such a good show.
some fantastic. Well, it was good because beyond being the type of story it was, it's a space sci-fi show. It had characters and a story arc who appealed to people who weren't even sci-fi fans. That's when you get good programming.
Yeah, it was a drama. I mean,
And so well done.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sci-fi has been looking for something like that ever since. But so I won the Emmy for that. But I think, it did a few things. All of my business has always been, first person, my peers. This person refers me to that person refers me to this person. I met David Icke through Sean Cassidy. I'd done a show called Cover Me for USA Cable. And again, how can I help? So I impressed Sean. Sean introduced me to David Icke. David Icke put me on Battlestar. Battlestar got me an opportunity to get an Emmy. Now we all got an Emmy together. So when Ron Moore does Outlander, he calls me. Now maybe if the show had been canceled halfway through the first season, I still did the great job I did, he would never really know what it was. But his selection of me was confirmed and validated by the Emmy Award. And I now have a client for life. So what happens is, I can still say I'm the only person who's gotten Sci-Fi Channel a sound Emmy. By the way, if anyone at the Sci-Fi Channel is listening, I should have your full lineup of shows. More than creating an opportunity where someone you don't know hears you have an Emmy and they're going to run out and hire you, because even though there's in your community a minority have them, finding sound designers in LA who have an Emmy is not hard, right? But it confirms to everyone in your peer group and that extended peer group, the people who are one tier outside of you who might not always call you, but boy, you'd call them for work. As soon as those people hear you have an Emmy, they're going to hire you.
Yeah.
They will choose you over the next person.
Well, what you just said a moment ago to me really makes things much more clear. That that the Emmy, because my question was going to be, well, you hold your work to the highest of standards all the time. So what was different about this particular project where you won an Emmy for it? And now that you've cleared up that role is a creative role,
I was really spoiled. We had Richard Gibbs as a composer on that, who was a member of Oingo Boingo, who did the pilot of Battlestar Galactica. And he had a ghostwriter, a guy named Bear McCrary. Bear has gone on to do Black Sails and Walking Dead, and he is huge now. So we had a great music team. We had a director named Michael Reimer on the pilot who was fantastic. Mark Stern was the president of Sci-Fi Channel. I still deal with Mark Stern. Was president of the Sci-Fi Channel. Now, I don't think that as a supervising sound editor, I ever would have had any recognition or FaceTime from the president of the Sci-Fi Channel until I got an Emmy. And then I get a letter from him. And then because I got a letter from him, I write back. And now I have a dialogue. I just talked to him the other day. So, those are your opportunities. But I got to tell you, as far as being easy to work with, and as you said, making yourself indispensable, isn't something you should do as a calculated effort. It should be something you're happy to do for your community.
Yeah.
If you do it, the work is going to follow. It always, always does.
Yeah, because people can feel if you're just doing it to try to get something. They have to know you're passionate and love what you do and that you care about people, that kind of thing. What was the creative journey on Battlestar that ended up winning an Emmy? Like, what were some of the ideas?
I'll tell you what was nice. Well, the sound crew really did a great job, and the design crew did a great job. But out of the gate, you're given these challenges. You're given animatics or pencil sketches or to start doing design too. And
because you have to come up with how things sound.
Well, but yes, within the confines of the executive producers you're working for, they give you sort of marching. Oh, I want something that's sweeter. I want something that's spicy, and then you start from there. So we did a bunch of things, but David Icke, the whole deal is there's no sound in space. Everyone knows that expression. But in a movie theater, you can use silence as sound because it is a soundproof environment. On TV, you can't use silence as sound because when the TV is silent, you hear your dishwasher, or the dog's barking, or the kids upstairs. So you can't, as a dramatic thing. If you're at the Cinerama Dome and all sound drops off and you see the moon, it is so striking and quiet, and you don't get quiet on TV. So our goal was that was our challenge. David Icke wanted to make everything sound much more like submarine duty than a spaceship. Soft underwater sounds, not these big laser sounds and these big ripping vehicles that shoot by you, but more like what a submarine would sound like going by you. And then the other thing is they wanted the ship to have a very organic sound. This is the heart of the ship, and these are the lungs of the ship. And so they wanted the ship itself to be its own living, breathing character. So those are some of the fun challenges. But I think once one department realizes, hey, these writers are serious and they want to do something special, these actors are, everybody else then just lives up to these highest standards. So I think that's what really made it special.
So my last question is for you, what is your next dream? Like where are you headed next? So you've climbed to the top of this particular field, but what is your next dream of or accomplishment that you want to experience?
I think scripted podcasting is the most exciting thing going on in audio. It takes your audio, your sound professionals, your creative sound professionals, who oftentimes are just contributing members. I'm the pastry chef at the restaurant. Well, now it's my restaurant, okay? And for the director, a film director, that's their restaurant.
Right.
But now I'm the film director, and so I get to create the entire soundscape. I get to direct the actors. I get to determine the feel of the program and how will it appeal to the audience, and really exercise an opinion which actors are hired and how they perform. And it is the fastest growing sector of the entertainment industry. I find that very exciting. And creatively for me, having experience in music and video game and film and television and documentary and streaming, I can take every bit of skill set I have, the way I produce vocals on a record, the way I do sound design for a video game, the way I do a show for Michael Reimer.
So for the actors who are listening to this thing, if they wanted to submit their work to you for consideration for any of the projects, since you're doing so many of these things now, before they bombard you with their materials, what kind of materials do you expect or would you want to have somebody have before they were to reach out?
Well, I can tell you selfishly, it's not what a lot of actors are going to want to hear, but I would like a clip of something that was professionally produced. And it's not that I don't want to work with new actors, but oftentimes I'm working for someone else. And when you work for someone else, Universal or Warner Brothers or Spielberg or whomever, there's a timeline and there's an expectation. And that timeline and expectation does not include teaching. Even basic informing. When someone walks in, I want them to know, just like when you're doing an audition, you want them to stand on the line, look the right place, show you both sides of their hands, right? When you and I met, I didn't know what I was supposed to do there. And as soon as someone walks in to audition for you, you know right away, do they know what they're doing or not? It's not do they have talent or not, okay? That will be determined on its own. For me, I already assume everyone who comes in has talent.
So are you looking for people who have professional voiceover experience, or are you looking for people who are experienced performers in television and film?
Someone can send me a video of community theater. Someone can send me a scene where they gave a Starbucks coffee to drive through in a movie to Seinfeld or something. But I would just like to see some professional grade work. It's not that I can't listen to somebody's demo and exercise an opinion, but as far as where I have traditionally fished talent, it's been from a working professional pool.
Because
they don't always have to be name
vetted.
talent.
Yeah.
They don't have to be name talent, but just can you hang with the band?
So not a voiceover demo. You don't want, or
I don't mind a voiceover demo, but if it's a voiceover demo, I want it to be an actual commercial. And a lot of people produce voice, and you have to do it. Okay, so I'm not criticizing it, and I've coached actors who have to do it, but some people will shoot an Advil commercial and shoot a Ford commercial. The text exactly as it is in the commercial, and they'll put in music and all. I don't care about that. I want to know the work that was professionally done. So that's what I want to see. I want to see how it came together and how your skill was used and all that kind of stuff. But that's that would be my. And then other than that, I'm. It's not that I'm closed off to new talent. But because I have been doing this since 1986, I have a huge Rolodex. If I need someone who can sing in French, I can find it.
Right.
If I need someone who speaks 15 languages, in my mind, I know the name of the person I would call.
Right.
Almost every major language, I can call one person and they can pick up the lines. And if I have enough actors in my group who are good with accents, he can say, here's what you're going to say in Swahili, and here's what you're going to say, and here's what you're going to say, right? So I already have those people. So if someone doesn't have a professional reel to show me, I would like to know what special skills they have.
right.
Because someone could let me know, a lot like when you've had directors on who said, someone auditioned for me 6 years ago, I just use him in a role now. If someone says to me, I can play a harp. Great. But a year later, there might be a need for me to record a harp, and I think, oh God, who did I meet years ago who could play harp, or who did I know who has who really can speak Gaelic? That was one of the problems in Outlander is in the Walla group, the Walla, which is done in Scotland, because they couldn't find the people here to do it convincingly. I don't know anyone locally who can cover Gaelic.
Okay, for all of you listening,
I've had to call embassies to find people who spoke certain languages in LA. And then I've had to call the producers and say, I need to Taft-Hartley someone, blah, 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 so-and-so, and here's why. Which I don't think you would disagree with if they had a special skill that I could not find in the community.
Totally, yeah, 100%.
So we've had that for languages.
All right, so you have asked every guest we've had on the show this question, so I'll ask you this question, is what shows are you watching and what do you think has been really well cast?
And can we include scripted podcasts in that?
Okay,
'Cause
great.
that's what you're into now, right? Are there some
I'll
scripted
tell you,
podcasts that
listen,
you like?
there are some that I like and none that I love. I think it is a very exciting medium. I think the most important thing to me is not that, storytellers are getting an opportunity. That's very exciting. I've told stories in music and video game and everywhere, so I'll keep pursuing that. What's really important to me is how it translates to the listener. I think Limetown is fantastic. And Limetown is a great example of people who were industry outsiders, who believed in their project, who went out and wrote it, cast it, produced it, and released it because no one else would hear their message. Year 2, they were signed with WME. And year 3, they sold their podcast as a scripted TV show with Jessica Alba and Stanley Tucci.
Wow.
They did a very fine job on their show. On the opposite side, Marvel did a podcast called Wolverine. Marvel has very high standards and they can afford to throw money at the problem. And they produced something that is highly, highly respectable. So I think that's fantastic. NPR has a podcast called Everything's Alive or All Things Alive. And I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but it is presented in a very straight ahead, one-on-one interview style like NPR would be, kind of very soft tones and very interested. But our guest this week is Jerry. He's a can of diet soda. Or they're going to talk to a pillow or a grain of sand. And all of that is performance and writing. You say, well, how can you interview a grain of sand? What are the pillow talks about the people who lived in the house and what they heard and saw. One day someone came and punched him for no reason, and he's heard this arguing.
That's amazing.
But what's interesting is in a review of that podcast, I read that someone actually both laughed and cried in a single episode where they were listening to a can of diet soda talking. And that's all writing and performance.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a forum like that out there for actors in TV or film, but to really demonstrate that skill set. And it's there in podcasting, which I think is very exciting.
Yeah.
How about
cool.
a TV show that you watch or that you think was really well cast?
What was the show? What was the show that we watched where I liked the guy who played Frankenstein?
Oh, Penny Dreadful.
Okay. I think Penny Dreadful was beautifully cast. I think it was, the performances were fantastic and the casting choices were great. And again, a lot like Battlestar, I think it went well beyond its demographic appeal. So if you give the show like that a chance, it'll really, really, really be interesting. I watch a lot. I get paid to watch TV. It's hard for me to watch a show objectively because if I see a production mistake, I will fixate on the production mistake. Sometimes I'll even know the people who made that mistake. So it gets difficult for me. But, I enjoyed You on Netflix. I wouldn't say, it's enjoyable. I think it was a good effort. Is there anything else that we've thought was fantastic? I'm always on the lookout.
Yeah.
There's things that have a lot of promise and things that I enjoy, but I just started season 2 of Killing Eve, which I'm a little behind on. I know, but because when I wake up, I go to work and watch TV. When I go home, I don't always want to watch TV.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I wanted people to meet you, Jack, because Jack is the producer and creator of this podcast series that we're doing. I wouldn't be hosting it without his energy and his thought that there was going to be value in this. And so I wanted you all to meet him, and you'll hear him chime in throughout some of the episodes.
You will hear me chime in. And listen, if anybody listening has any question about voice work or how they can get into it or what they should do, they can email me at jack@podcastsage.com, and I will give them my best advice, which might not be what they want to hear, but it will certainly be true.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Jack, so much. And thank you,
so
Lara,
much.
for joining and
Yeah, this is
co-hosting with me
great.
today. All right, everybody.